Hey, this is Melissa Corcaballo, and you're listening to The Business Side of Music with the beatboxer of the podcast world, Bob Bender.
Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
Here in the studio in Nashville, Tennessee, another exciting episode of The Business Side of Music, because they're all exciting if you continue to listen. If it's on stage, at a podium, or in front of the camera, Bill Cakmis is hired to create it, develop it, enhance it, or fix it. God knows we all need fixing. For over 30 years, Bill has coached singers, actors, anchors, talk show hosts, politicians, Lord help you, doctors, lawyers, CEOs, and athletes. His clients include Grammy, Oscar, Tony, and Emmy winners. He has partnered with major film studios, production companies, TV stations, and national cable networks such as CNN, Fox, and the Weather Channel to create productions that are unique, creative, and powerful. Bill, welcome to the show.
Why, thank you. Thank you so much. You did such a nice job introducing me. I think we ought to stop right there.
Okay, thanks. Hope everybody enjoyed the show. The shortest Business Side of Music podcast episode ever.
But fascinating.
Yes. Well, we're actually going to keep that fascination going because I got all kinds of questions for you.
Awesome.
This is a little different than the norm. And one of the things I always do, our listeners know, is I always ask how you got in the business, who influenced you, what influenced you. But this is a little different cut of the cloth than what we normally have, because a lot of times we have music entrepreneurs. But you're kind of the doctor who fixes those people that need fixing. How did you get started in all this?
It's an interesting thing. People ask me all the time about how to get into it, how to start it, and there's no school for it. There's no university course for it. I think it's a series of events that happen in your life, or at least in mine, that brought me to this point. God gave everybody something. I just got that thing where when I walk into a room full of crap, my first thought is, okay, there's a pony here somewhere. All we have to do is find the pony, fix it, groom it, and all of that crap will just disappear, right? So early on, I always loved directing and teaching and coaching, but I grew up as an actor. My mother had me on stage since I was 6, so I was a professional actor from the time I was very young until the time I was in my 20s. I left college and I went to Los Angeles to become a television and film actor. And while I was there and working, I taught at the Beverly Hills Playhouse because I just loved teaching. And that's really what I love to do. Acting is what I did to make money, and teaching and coaching is what I did to have fun.
That's usually the opposite.
I know. I understand. Well, you know, I did a soap for a few years, and while I was on the soap, the lines, sitting around and learning lines would drive me insane. Because you had to sit in one place, and I had 15 pages a day, and it would just drive me crazy. And I walked by John Aniston, who was Jennifer Aniston's father.
Right.
At the time, he was on the show, and I was walking by his dressing room one day, and I said, John, I got to ask you. He said, what? I said, all of these lines, they're driving me nuts. And he looked at me kind of gruffly, and he said, see that newspaper, bring it over to me. And so I walked it over to him. He picked up the newspaper. He looked at the front page for a minute. He handed it back to me. He said, pick a paragraph. I said, pick a paragraph? He said, yeah, just pick a paragraph. And so I picked a paragraph on the front of the newspaper. And he said, give me the first 3 words. And I gave it to him. And he said the whole paragraph as if it was coming out of his heart. I said, John, how do you do that? He said, 20 years. Get the hell out of here. And so I realized early on that acting, especially for these folks, it was a job. That's all it was. It wasn't really acting. It wasn't art. It was just a job to make money, to put your kids through school, and which is awesome. And it was fine. And so they were all very good at it. But I just realized at a certain point that it just wasn't what I loved to do. What I loved to do was teach and coach and direct. So as soon as my contract was up, I decided, I'm going to stop for a while. I'm not going to act. I'm just going to pursue this other course. And the second I did that, suddenly the floodgates opened, because for years I had been helping people to win acting awards just by going over to their house and helping them out. And suddenly when I said that I was going to do this now as a living, I got referrals. And from the referrals, I started to get all kinds of crazy referrals. One of them early on was Kenny Norton. Kenny was the heavyweight champion of the world at the time, and he had just done a film called Mandingo. And right after that film, Kenny's manager said, Kenny, acting classes might not be a bad thing. So I started working with Kenny as an actor, but at the same time, he was getting ready to defend his title. And one day, Kenny came in to a session, and he looked like he'd just been beaten up. And I said, Kenny, where have you been? He said, oh, man, I was just sparring, because he was preparing to defend his title. And I said, Kenny, what's the hardest thing about winning? And I thought he was going to say, well, getting my head beaten in every day, not seeing my kids for weeks at a time. But Kenny looked at me and he said, the hardest thing about winning, he said, once you win, you're not allowed to lose. Now, coming from Kenny, that was pretty heady, right? And I said, well, then, Kenny, why do you do it? And then Kenny did his Kenny thing. He said, hey, babe, it was what I do. I win is what I do. And working with a lot of professional athletes over the years, I've learned that it's just who they are. Winning is just who they are. In any case, through that series of events, people started to come to me and ask me to help them act or speak or present. And one thing led to another. And here I am, 30-something years later, having worked with all of these different folks in all of these different fields. And I love it because it's never the same.
If you had to choose who would be I'm going to say it. I was going to say who would be the easiest to work with, but we're going to go in the opposite direction. Who would be the most difficult? Singers, actors, news anchors, talk show hosts, politicians, etc. Is there one that you just kind of almost every time you shake your head, it is that pony in the room that has dumped all the crap on the floor?
It's an interesting thing because... And
you don't have to name names. You can.
I sign more NDAs than you'd ever know. So there are a lot of names I can't tell you, but I will tell you that there are characters that go along with some of these folks. CEOs are the most difficult to work with because they're the ones that'll call you in, you'll get there, and they're so busy, they don't really have time for you. So by the end of it, it's like, did we even do anything? And they'll thank you and they'll be thrilled that you were there. And you really didn't do much because they had 14 things that were going on at the same time. Politicians are the worst. It used to be kind of fun years ago, but now it's gotten to a place where I really don't like to do it because, just the world we live in now. It's gotten away from these folks helping other people and helping, and they've become more about helping themselves.
Right.
And it's very difficult at this point because one of the tenets that I've always maintained in doing what I do is that it's not about you. To be a great communicator, you have to know and understand it's not about you. It's about the people you're talking to. It's about the people you're communicating with. It's storytelling is never about the story, ever. It's about the person you're talking to. We all have a family story we've told 100 times, and we're about to tell it at a party. And at that moment, our significant other says, okay, I'm going to go into the next room because this is a great story. I'll be back in about 10 minutes. And you're about to tell the story, and you'll tell it as if it were the first time, but you'll tell it differently to your parents' friends than you would to your best friend, than you would to a stranger, than you would to a man, a woman, and child, because it's not about the story. It's about the person you're talking to and getting them to react or feel or think. So that's a roundabout way of saying that politicians have gotten to a place where I don't like working with them because that tenet, it's not about you. I don't think they understand it anymore. And so CEOs are probably the worst. The easiest to train are professional athletes because their whole life has been about coaching, being coached, being told what to do. And these guys, I'm working with a Titan, one of the Tennessee Titans right now, and I saw them practice last year, and he came in and sat down for a session. And I said, before we start, I just got to ask you, you got to hate practice, right? He said, no, man, I love practice. Now, this guy's like an Adonis, a huge guy, very sweet, kill you in a second. It's that guy. And very street kind of guy, but lovely. He said, no, I love practice. I said, why? He said, it's the only time you get to fall on your butt. He didn't say butt, but close enough. It's the only time you get to fall on your butt. And I said, why is that important? And he said, it's the only time you learn anything. He said, when I'm playing a game, now this guy's been playing for 20 years and he's great at what he does, but he said, when I'm playing a game, I got to stay in my lane because I got mouths to feed. I can't be screwing around and trying out new things. He said, but if I don't learn anything new, I got young guys on the team nipping at my heels trying to take over my job. So I got to keep learning. When am I going to do that? So he said, I've got to do it in practice. And he said, it's okay if the coach gets aggravated with me because I try things out and they don't work because I learn. Every time something goes wrong, I learn. These guys, and like I said, I've worked with football stars and Olympic athletes and tennis athletes, and all of these folks love coaching because they really don't want to do homework. They don't want to write down anything. They don't want to memorize anything. All they say is, Coach, just tell me what to do, and I'll do it.
Yeah, that was me in high school. Artists, musicians, the same thing. I mean, for them to be successful, it's practice, practice, practice. Learn your instrument. But then you get on stage, and that's really what kind of separates the grain from the chaff.
Absolutely.
And the artist that gets on stage, and you said it, it becomes that communication skill
right.
that most artists don't have.
Many artists don't have, especially when they start, because they spent their whole developmental time sitting on their bed learning how to play the guitar or singing to a wall or singing into their camera phone to their socials. And all of their friends and family tell them how wonderful they are, and they might be very talented. But there's a difference between talent and technique. Talent is a God-given thing. You can't buy it. You can't create it. Nobody can give you talent. You're either born with it or you're not. Some people have a lot. Some people have a little. But whatever you got, you got. You're not born with technique. You've got nothing. Technique is something you build along the way. And the more technique you have, the more it will support your talent. So what I found with a lot of young artists, a lot of young performers, musicians, songwriters, is that when they first start off, they tend to want the song to support them, the instrument and the music to support them. But the problem is when you get out on a stage in front of 1,000 people or 10,000 people, or even at the Bluebird with 100 people, you have to realize that you're no longer just a songwriter. You have to be a storyteller. You have to be a star. You have to be there for the audience. It's your connection with the audience and how you get them to react. That's what matters. If it was just about the music, then sell them a CD and go home. If that's all it is. But when people go out and pay money to see performance, they want an experience that goes far beyond the song itself. They need that moment in time. They want that feeling of everything that performer can give them, the sound, the sight, the smell, the intensity. And you can't just do that. Music is powerful, but it ain't powerful enough without that performer to make it real for those music goers.
We're going to take a break, get a word in for a couple of our sponsors who help pay the bills. And when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Bill Cakmis.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Branding. What is it really? It goes by many names: marketing, licensing, and image, when in reality, it's 7 key branding formulas that all need to harmonize perfectly. Mess up just one formula and you have compromised the whole brand build. Dead Horse Branding facilitates all 7 formulas under one roof, building, promoting, and marketing all brands at all different stages of their level. We are a marketing team's dream, and we were built to service talent, artist managers, record labels, independent artists, iconic brands, legacy estates, and startups. Rooted in music and seated across other industries like fashion, various talent, hospitality, authors, interior designers, lifestyle brands, and corporate entities. The 7 branding formulas do not discriminate. 7 branding formulas, all in one swift movement. Sick of beating that dead horse? Come to Dead Horse. Please visit us at deadhorsebranding.com or send us an email to info@deadhorsebranding.com.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Bill Cakmis is sitting across the table. We were talking about the artist. I've worked with a lot of artists over the years who get up on stage and they perform, but they're not entertaining. And there is a difference there. And as you said, being able to speak to the audience, whether it's 50 people or it's 5,000 people, that seems to be the one component that's always missing, or nearly always missing. On the other hand, you get the artist up there who talks and talks and talks and talks and almost forgets to perform. Is there a fine line somewhere?
Oh, it's different for every artist. I think the talents that the artist has got to be the factor that decides how much of it is going to be talk and how much is going to be song. And, there's some artists that they're storytellers and their songs are really talking, and there are others that their voice is so angelic that the voice is the thing that really people glom onto first and hook onto first. But the through line, I think, is the human condition. The thing that is very difficult to teach, and it's really innate in people, is do you have an understanding of humanity and how people process information, how they are compelled by art. And there are some artists that have an innate understanding of that and are able to communicate that. I have a great friend who's an executive producer on television, and he does a lot of these sitcoms. And we were talking one day, and he said, anybody can read a line of Shakespeare, but not everybody can make sense of a line of Shakespeare. And he said, it's the same for comedy. Anybody can read a joke, but there are only so many people that can make sense of that joke and take that joke and do it in such a way that it's funny for people. But it's a talent, and it has to be supported by a skill. But as I said before, I think a lot of these young folks that are just coming up, I will be hired to get them to cross that bridge from having performed in front of family and friends to having to perform in front of groups of people who don't know them. And how do you communicate? How do you get those people in that audience to really connect with you and with your music? And to do that, you have to understand the human condition. You have to understand that the song that you wrote, it might be a great song, but that doesn't mean if you can't sing it well, It's not a great song,
Yeah.
right? So how do you sing it well? Well, you've got to be able to interpret it. And how do you interpret it? You have to understand the human condition. It's a tricky thing. And like I said, some people have it innately, and some people have to learn it. And it's not, I can't tell you the number of parents over the years who've asked me to give their children talent. I can't do that.
There's not enough money in the world.
You can't. It's not a possible. It's in the DNA. Now you can teach somebody technique. You can get them to support their talent so much that all of it shows itself. But you can't give a kid talent. You just can't do it.
Yeah, and it's all in the delivery too. Like you said, with the joke, it's timing. It's all knowing how to deliver the song or the joke or the Shakespearean piece on stage.
Right. And everyone, you will have three. I've worked with a lot of stand-ups over the years, and every stand-up has their own rhythm and style. And you could hear the same joke told by three different stand-ups, and each one of them be funny, but each one of them be different because they're using their own humanity, their own rhythm and style to give that joke life. And that's the thing that's a key, when I'm working, whether it's with a CEO or with a news anchor or with an artist. One of the first things I do is find out who this person is, find out what their rhythm and style is. I'll get them to tell me stories about about how they grew up and about their home life and about their life now and about what they think about their job. And through talking to them, and having them tell me those stories, I get a real sense of what their rhythm and, their own innate timing. And from that, in the last 6 months, I've had two of these football players, NFL players, who came to me needing to tell to do a talk, not a TED talk, but a corporate talk. And both of them, almost the same way, they came and they sat down and they'd go, "Hey, coach." I go, "Hey, man." I said, "What are we doing?" He said, "I got to do a speech." I said, "Great." I said, "What do you want to talk about?" And they'll look at me and they go, "I don't know." And I'll go, "Okay." I said, "Well, who are you talking to?" And then they'll pick up their phone and they'll find out who they're talking to and what they're talking about. And I said, "Well, do you have a message?" And they'll look at me and they'll go, "Nope."
Oh my gosh.
And so I go, "All right, well, let's start talking about your life." And this last guy I worked with, I took a day to hear all about his youth and growing up and all the things that happened to him up until the recent his recent life. And I started to get there was a certain through line in his particular life through things that had happened to him. Once he told me those stories, I said, "Okay, tell me this. Does this sound like something that you believe in and something that you live by?" And I told him the through line that I thought he would. And he looked at me, he said, "How do you know?" I said, "You just spent a whole day telling me that." I said, "So here's what we're going to do. You know that story you told me about your mom? Okay, let's hold on to that one. You know that story you told me about you? Actually, he when he was in high school, he actually held a gun to somebody. Do you remember that story? Let's take that one. And remember the story where in this third game you did so and so and such and such. All right, I want you to do those three stories again. But I want you to leave out this little piece. I want you to add this, and then we're going to do that. And because we need to do it within 45 minutes, I think the time was. And so I had to get him to tell and retell these stories. So because he wasn't going to write anything down, he wasn't going to memorize anything because these guys don't do that. So I had to take his rhythm, his style, his stories, and I had to tweak them and carve them out so that he walked out of there feeling great about telling stories he'd been telling his whole life, right? And that's sometimes most of the time, the way I have to approach this work is first find out who these folks are, find out their rhythm and style, find out their message, or find it for them, and then go from there and put it into their work, their art, whatever that is.
Once again, it's all about the delivery.
It's all about the delivery, yeah.
Taking an athlete, an NFL football player or an Olympic runner, or taking an artist, and I see it so many times, and it's cringeworthy when they become actors on a TV show or in a movie. You would think there would be somebody there to tell them. Like you brought up the one boxer, Ken Norton.
Ken Norton.
Who was in the movie, and his manager said, you might want to fix this.
You might want to think about acting classes, yeah.
That innate ability to be able to do what you do on the field or on the track or on a stage doesn't always translate to being in front of a camera.
Absolutely. In fact, that's one of the most difficult things, and many times it's the reason I get called in. Dick Clark did a show here years ago called Primetime Country for TNN. He produced the show for TNN, and Primetime Country had been around forever, and it had iterations with different hosts. And I got a call one day from Dick. I wasn't living in Nashville at the time, and Dick called me and said, I've got a host problem. Now, I hear that every 6 months. Somebody calls me and says, I've got a host problem. And I said, what's your problem? And Dick said, women just don't like him. And the show can't survive if women don't like the host of our show. I said, all right. And he said, can you fix it? I said, Dick, I've got to see it, and then I can tell you. So Dick, I was living in Dallas at the time, so Dick flew me out here, and I watched the show. And I sat down with him. I said, yeah, I can tell you exactly what's wrong. There are writing issues. You guys are dressing him like he's a pimp. You know, he doesn't know how to host. Because you hired him because he was an artist. He's a storyteller. He's a writer. He's a performer, and you hired him. But just because he's successful in that genre doesn't necessarily mean you can just host a show. It doesn't work that way. Hosting a show, they're very specific. It's a very specific skill set. He would do things like Dolly Parton would come on the show, and he wouldn't get up from his desk. He would just wave her over. He'd go, "Come on, honey, come on over." Oh, right. And so, of course, women hate him. Look at the way he's treating women, right?
That's very endearing,
right? So I said, yeah. So I need to work with the producers on how to write. I need to talk to the director. I need to talk to who's dressing the guy, and also, obviously, I need to work with him because he doesn't know how to host a show. So Dick takes me introduces me to this gentleman. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning. He's in his office. Dick brings me in, and Dick Clark says, Bill Cakmis, this is so-and-so. This is Joe Schmo. And Joe Schmo, this is Bill Cakmis. Bill's going to be working with you on how to host a show. Now, the reason I usually get called is because they've tried everything else. I'm the last thing that they try because, but if the person is either belligerent or they just don't want to deal or they're going to be who they're going to be, then I get called in. So Dick introduces us. Dick walks out, and I haven't said 2 words. And this guy looks at me, and he looks at me and he says, I just want to let you know, I'm not changing. I said, excuse me? And he pointed to himself, and he said, I like Joe Schmo. And he said, Joe Schmo isn't changing. I said, wow. So I said, I guess we're done. He said, I guess we are. I said, you could have said that with Dick Clark in the room. He said, you go tell him. So, all right. So I turned around to walk out, and as I got to the door of his office, I did the Columbo thing. I just turned around. I said, what? Just one more thing. He went, what? I said, do you talk the same way to your wife that you do to Dick? He said, no. I said, do you talk the same way to Dick you do to your kids? He said, no. I said, so which one is the real Joe Schmo and which one is the lie? Well, that flew all over him. He went crazy. He got up. He started to yell at me. He said things. He called me names I hadn't heard since high school. And then once he finally calmed down, I said, are you done? He said, yeah, I'm done. I said, during that little tirade, one of the things you said was you changed the way you talk depending on who you're talking to succeed in that situation. Because I said you talk differently to your wife than you do to Dick. And he said, that's right. I said, the only reason I'm here is to make you the best Joe Schmo possible for this television show. I'm not trying to make you somebody else. We're trying to find the best Joe Schmo for this show. I said, but you know what? You're right. We're done. And I turned around to walk out, and he went, well, now wait a minute. And then I worked on that show for about 4 years. So but this is the kind of, about 70% of what I do is I get called in because they've tried everything else and they can't get this person to listen or to change, but they can't get rid of them. They're stuck.
Yeah.
And so, I get called in to fix it.
We're going to take another break, get a couple more words in for a few of our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to have some more conversation with Bill Cakmis.
You're listening to the business side of music.
This is Mark Allen Barnett, singer, songwriter, creative coach, and mentor. Are you an artist or songwriter or a family member or friend of someone who is? Are you trying to find your way through the often confusing world of today's music business? I'm here to help. Over the past 40 years, I've written and recorded hit songs, have had more than my share of live performances, and have seen the ups and downs of the music industry and what Music City, also known as Nashville, has to offer. I'm here to share that information with you. The Mark Allen Barnett Songwriting Tours of Nashville are a one-day to multi-day private interactive workshops developed to help you discover your best approach to songwriting, performing in front of a live audience, along with the correct way to network within the music industry. Our workshops are based around what you need to know. While in Nashville, you get an insight from behind the scenes, learn about the history of Music City, separate fact from fiction, and give yourself or a loved one the time of your life. This workshop makes the perfect gift for someone you love who wants to get their foot in the door of the music business the right way. For more information, go to www.markallenbarnett.com or www.musicchoosesyou.com. Remember, you don't choose music. Music chooses you.
As a musician, you have a dream. That vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is a part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about independence coupled with committed benevolent interest, which means that they can represent your client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products. It's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact John Adams at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309 for more information.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, Bill Cakmis is sitting across the table from us here. Performance coaches, I actually like the idea of you being the show doctor, which I looked up in your show notes. And I think that's probably a great analogy for a lot of people who want to try and figure out what's going on in their life and in their career, because so many times those interact. You've written 4 books, and you said one of them's a children's book and another one's out of print. But the last 2, Coffee with Cakmis and Loyalty, Trust, and Success. Let's talk about Coffee with Cakmis for a minute.
Sure.
Because that one is available, right?
Yes. Amazon.
What's the book about?
Throughout my career, when I work with folks, I always come up with analogies for their specific problem or situation. Because really, at the end of the day, my job is to get them out of their own way so they can do their job. Most of these people, I don't teach them how to do their job because they're usually pretty proficient at it. It's just that they've gotten beyond it and they've gotten in the way of it.
Right.
So I will come up with analogies or come up with thoughts and ideas, or someone else has said something to me and I'll put it into whatever they're working on. So I just had something a couple of weeks ago with a woman who came in and she's having problem. She's a performer and she's having a problem on stage because she's having a problem at home. And the person at home is a detriment in her life. It has been that way for quite a while. Abusive. And one of the things that we talked about is I said, there's that old story about the scorpion who gets on the frog's back and asks the frog, would you just take me across the pond? And the frog said, I'm not going to let you on my back because you're a scorpion and you'll kill me. And the scorpion said, why would I do that? I need to get across the pond. You're the only way I can get across the pond. And the frog says, fine, lets the scorpion on his back, halfway across the pond, the scorpion stings the frog. And as the frog and the scorpion are drowning, the frog said, "Why did you do that?" And the scorpion said, "Because I'm a scorpion. It's what I do." And so what I said to her was, this person that you're keeping in your life is like a scorpion. You're allowing it to sit in your hand, knowing that eventually it's going to sting you again, because that's what it is. So if you want this pain to continue, then you've got to allow the scorpion to stay there. But if you want to get past it, you've got to find a way to let the scorpion go, right? And so these kinds of stories, that kind of story, that I said to her, that kind of a story is in this book, Coffee with Cakmis, because what Coffee with Cakmis is every day, it's a story you can read every day of the year that will motivate you and help you through your day. And that's just one of the many stories that I put in there. And it's just a motivational book.
Yeah, because a lot of times, many times, your personal life interweaves with your professional life. And especially, I toured for years on the road with artists. And if they had a fight with their boyfriend, girlfriend, wife, husband, whatever it was, they were pretty foul to be around. And when it was time to get on stage, you have to go, okay, happy face now.
Right.
And that wasn't always easy to do.
No. And you've got to learn ways to... Stanislavski used to say, you have to wipe your feet at the door before you walk into the theater. And what he was saying was, whatever crap was going on in your life, it has to stay outside of that theater. And when you walk in, you have to do your job. So, the same thing with these performers. I've got a guy on Broadway who something was going on in his life, and he was getting nervous right before he would go on stage, and he'd want to throw up. And he was concerned that he would throw up on stage. Now, this guy's been doing Broadway forever, but suddenly this has happened to him. So I can't fix his life. But what I said to him is, I said, what's your biggest worry? Because he was tightening up and he wasn't performing well on stage. He said, my biggest worry is on stage, I'm going to throw up. And I said, fine. So I got the stage manager and I said, I need you to find me a bucket, the biggest bucket you can find me. So the guy goes and finds me a bucket, and I put it backstage right before his entrance. And I told the guy, I said, come here, I want to show you something. I said, see that? I want you to throw up in that bucket before you go out on stage tonight. He said, what? I said, I want you to throw up in that bucket before you go out on stage. He said, Bill, what if I can't? I said, great, then you won't throw up on the show. But if you have to throw up, there's your bucket. And then he was fine. And then he didn't have to throw up at all, and it kind of went away, right? So it's being able to find a way, and it's different for everybody, to have something that you do before you perform, before you speak, before you do whatever you're going to do that gets you in the frame of mind of being that person that those people came to pay for,
right,
and that paid for, and that came to see. And it's just finding that thing and being able to do that thing.
Loyalty, Trust, and Success, which is your latest book. Yes. Let's go down that path for a minute.
I wrote that because I work with a lot of newscasters. I work with folks from CNN and Fox, but a lot of local news stations. I work with a local news station here in town. And a lot of these folks that start off in the business of broadcast news were never taught how to communicate on camera. They were taught how to edit and how to write and do everything but communicate on camera, right? So I thought, it's interesting, in all of the different fields I work in, there are some through lines that everybody needs to know and understand about communicating, about being able to do something so that they come across as real, conversational, sincere, and to be able to circumvent nerves, because everybody has nerves. These folks that can speak one-on-one, when they get either on camera or when they get in front of people, suddenly they get nervous. So what this book deals with are ways to either circumvent nerves or learn to use them. It also teaches communicators how to craft a story or how to craft a piece of communication so that you have the ability to connect with the people that you're talking to, and it also deals with the techniques, the skill set of actually performing, whether it's on stage or on camera. So I dealt with all of those issues in this particular book.
And people can find those books, as you said, on Amazon?
Amazon.
Yeah. How can folks go about finding you for your services?
Oh, thank you for asking. That's all. They can go to my website, which is cakmis.com, CAKMIS.com. They can go there and find me, and and they can connect with me either through the website or certainly I have an email, which is cakmis@live.com. So either way.
Here's a shout out to our loyal listeners. Without all of you, we wouldn't be one of the most listened to music industry interview podcasts, including achieving #1 status in many countries around the world, according to Apple Podcasts. In fact, we just found out we've been named #1 in Portugal, of all places. If you enjoy our show, please check out our Facebook page at the Business Side of Music Podcast. Please do not forget to subscribe and definitely hit the like button. While you're at it, go to our page on YouTube and click on the Business Side of Music Podcast to subscribe. You can check out our video webcast there and get to see me and guests such as Bill here in the studio, and maybe on occasions Buddy the Music Dog, although today he's been incarcerated by his mother. Last but not least, check us out and follow us on X. See, I got it right, folks. Been calling it Twitter for so long, but check us out on X at Biz Music Podcast. That's BIZ Music Podcast. Bill, thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you, man. I really do appreciate it.
This was truly not only educational, but entertaining.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, I do too.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Busan.